Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. So recently somebody commented on one of my videos asking like how much money or in savings I had before I went to Japan and how much I spend. So yeah, I feel like I have quite a lot to say on this. So I thought I'd just make an entire video dedicated to this subject. So basically just, how much money you need. I'm budgeting in regards to a working holiday in Japan. So recently they've actually changed the rules so you can stay 2 years in Japan, which is really cool. So even if you've done your 1 year working holiday, you can go back and do another year. So that's quite tempting. For now, I don't have any plans, but who knows what the future entails. I do know a lot of people are wanting to go to Japan, especially with the ski season. It's pretty popular for a lot of people that just want to, go over and work for a bit and experience the snow. But yeah, so personally, in terms of savings, I had a lot of savings. I don't even know exactly how much, but I've been working pretty much like all my adult life, so I have a lot in savings. The requirement for the working holiday is you need at least 3,000 New Zealand dollars or 4,000 if you don't have a return ticket. Now personally I had a lot, like double this, but obviously that doesn't mean that I wanted to spend all of my savings. And in fact, yeah, my plan was basically to have a job lined up, so that meant that I would know that going in I would be able to work and then save money from that job, and then I'd be able to travel afterwards. So yeah, I would say again minimum like $4,000 I think is a good amount, and honestly as much as you can I would recommend. Like obviously it's better to have more money than left over than not enough. So yeah, in terms of budgeting, so before you get to Japan obviously you will have some expenses. So luckily the visa is free and you don't have to buy health insurance beforehand, so you save a lot of money with that. But you will need to buy your flights. So I would always recommend just buy a one-way flight. I bought mine quite late, I think like a week before I left, just because I was wanting to secure a job before I flew over. So yeah, obviously that can make things a bit more expensive, and depending on where you come from it will be less or more expensive. From New Zealand I think I paid about 800 New Zealand dollars from memory, and that was like a flight with layover, so it wasn't direct. I think, yeah, that was to Tokyo, and then I had to buy another flight to Sapporo for my work. You gotta budget for your flight to Japan, and then you're probably gonna need some accommodation. So I had a job with accommodation, but before I started work, I needed to stay, I think, for a few days in Tokyo and then a few days in Sapporo, so about 1 week's worth of accommodation. And I stayed in hostels, and I pretty much cooked most of my food, or I just bought food from the konbini, so I didn't spend a lot on, eating out or accommodation. And then in terms of work, I was lucky to have like I guess like full-time hours and a decent salary for the role. I was making about 1,500 yen per hour, which for Japan is actually not bad. And yeah, like I said, I had decent hours and I had staff accommodation, which is a big thing as well. And then because I worked in a restaurant, I got a lot of free food, so I almost spent like no money on groceries or eating out. And that's basically how I managed to save so much money from working. So I had a job for the winter season, and I ended up working about 3.5 months there, with very affordable staff accommodation and free meals. I managed to save actually quite a decent amount of money, or more than I expected. So what I would recommend for people is try and have like a job lined up, or if not a job, at least some kind of accommodation or like volunteering, situation where you're not going to have to pay for your accommodation, because that's definitely going to be your biggest cost straight up. So yeah, like if you're going for the winter season, obviously get a job in a ski resort, and you most likely will have staff accommodation. In summer I worked at a summer camp, and I also had staff accommodation with that. If you're going, I would say any other time of the year, just contact as many hostels as you can and try get like a volunteer gig. In Japan, there's quite a lot of them, and because hostels are pretty strict with their volunteers, like in Japan you have to have a work visa even just to volunteer at a hostel. So I think it's pretty easy. If you have a working holiday visa, you can get pretty decent gigs. Like I was volunteering at hostels where I only had to work 1 or 2 hours a day, which is really good, and it's going to save you a lot of money in the long term. And with that, what I also knew people that alongside their volunteering, they also found other jobs. So that meant that they got paid jobs, and then they would do like, you know, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day of volunteering, and that meant that they have free accommodation. So they were able to basically save all of their money from their part-time job. So in terms of how to manage your money, I basically had a Wise account that I have been using for a long time. So I had a Wise card, and then I also had a bit of cash when I first arrived, just because for the public transport and stuff like that, you need to have cash. Like if you're taking trains, they don't accept like card payment, which is kind of outdated, but yeah. And then a lot of restaurants as well also need cash. So yeah, all the ATMs are pretty widely spread, but just I think it's also always good to have a little bit of cash just when you first arrive. So like at the airport, you know, you don't have to pay like those ridiculous fees. And then yeah, basically as soon as I could, I opened a bank account with Japan Post. So since I had a job and accommodation and an address and everything like sorted, it was pretty easy to open my bank account. And then I was able to get like a debit card, so I could use that card even for online purchases as well, which was really, really handy. Personally, I had a lot of savings, but I would say yeah, definitely $3,000 is a good amount, or I think it's equivalent to about 300,000 yen. Yeah, I think it's good because you would want enough money, I would say, to last you 2 months, even if you do have a job lined up. I think especially, you know, for example, if you are going to a ski resort, you're probably going to be wanting to buy some type of gear. Like even though I bought secondhand gear, it's still, you know, at pretty significant cost. You might need to buy you know, ski jacket, ski pants, boots, a snowboard, a helmet. If your lift pass isn't provided, then that's a huge cost. If you're willing to, you know, buy that, that could be like $1,000 right there. And then some people I knew also bought a car, so that's a huge cost as well, probably another few $1,000s if you have the, you know, savings. Also bear in mind that in Japan you get paid monthly, so even if you start working, you might not get paid until 1 month afterwards. So you still need, you know, money to pay for food, toiletries, you know, whatever for that first month. As well, if you want to go out, then obviously you need some spending money as well. Yeah, with that being said, I guess diving into my personal experience. So I don't really have exact numbers, but I think that I managed to save, from working 3.5 months, I managed to save about, I want to say the equivalent of like $2,000 a month. So this is New Zealand dollars, by the way. So I think that equates to maybe, let's say $6,000. So maybe between 500 and 600,000 yen from working. That was my first job. And then after that, I did volunteering at a hostel for 2 months. So during that period, I almost spent no money because I didn't pay for accommodation. So my only cost was really food. So I would shop always at like budget supermarkets, and I had a pretty cheap diet. In general, groceries are pretty cheap in Japan. And then occasionally I would go out to a restaurant, but like that was pretty cheap as well. So yeah, and then in those 2 months, I don't know how much I spent, maybe $1,000. And then after that, I did a little bit of traveling. So I went to Kyushu for like a week, and then I started another job in Hakuba. So I didn't have to pay for my accommodation, but flights within Japan are pretty cheap. And then as soon as I arrived into Hakuba in Nagano, I also had staff accommodation, and then I also had some staff meals as well. So that job, I didn't really have many hours, so I didn't really manage to save a lot of money. Maybe, I don't even know, maybe like $1,000, $2,000 the whole summer. But then I ended up having to pay for like insurance, and then healthcare, and then taxes, and then a lot of things. So yeah, let's say I made $1,000 from that job. Yeah, so in total, I was left with about 5,000 New Zealand dollars by the end of that. And then after that, I volunteered for another month near Mount Fuji. And again, I basically spent no money because I didn't even go out at all. I would just, yeah, stay in the hostel for free, and we got like a little allowance for groceries. So I'd just, you know, buy my own food and then cook. And then after that, I spent about a month traveling around in Japan and Korea. So obviously I spent some money, I don't know, maybe like $1,000, I want to say. Like I travel on a pretty tight budget. So yeah, I ended up coming home, I think with a few $1,000s in savings at the end of it. So yeah, that goes to show that you don't really need a lot of money. However, it definitely depends on how you choose to travel and how you spend your money. and how much you buy. Like, I heard a lot of people, I actually remember my roommate, she had just turned 18, like, bless her, but she was just like obviously obsessed with everything. You know, she was from the UK, everything in Japan was like completely new, really novel, and she just wanted to buy like everything. And so she did a lot of shopping, and she would always go out, even to konbinis. Like, you think it it's cheap, but it actually adds up, you know, going to like buy food, you know, even spending like $10, $20 here and there, like it definitely adds up. And I was pretty strict with myself when I was working, especially at that ski resort, because I had so much free food. I basically never ate out. Yeah, a lot of people like to buy a lot of, you know, clothes, souvenirs, whatever. Like, personally, I was pretty strict with myself, also knowing that I wanted to keep on traveling. I didn't want to have too much, you know, I didn't want to like pack my suitcase full too early on. So yeah, I was definitely pretty smart with my money. So yeah, with that being said, again, I would say at least $3,000 to $4,000 you need just to begin with. And then it's also nice to have, you know, backup savings as well. But if you budget properly and you manage your money well, and you find, you know, jobs with free accommodation, volunteering, and that kind of thing, you can travel very cheap and you don't need to spend a lot of money either. But yeah, hopefully this video has been a bit helpful. If you have any other further questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I will see you guys in my next video. Ciao!